Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai, day and night, fire and ice. One style completely focused on defense, the other focused on offense. They could not be more different. But is that really true? Can you actually have a martial art whose sole focus is on powerful offense, or another martial art whose only focused on blocking and evading? The answer obviously is no. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how Miyagi-Do does focus on offense and how Cobra Kai already included a lot of defense. So make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications turned on, and let's get started. So for those of you who don't know, Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do are both martial arts styles from the Karate Kid franchise. Miyagi-Do being used by the titular main character Daniel Larusso, and Cobra Kai being used by Johnny Lawrence, the star of Cobra Kai. Now these two styles are technically fictional, but they are based on real-world martial arts. Miyagi-Do is based on the Okinawan karate form of Goju-Ryu, and Cobra Kai is based on the Korean Tang. Now we can go into a separate argument about how Tang isn't really karate, but I'm not interested in having that conversation right now. Do that down in the comments. The point is, both of these styles are based on real-world martial arts. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to talk about Goju-Ryu and Miyagi-Do kind of interchangeably, and Tang and Cobra Kai also kind of interchangeably. And also, I'm not going to be referring to Cobra Kai as Eagle Fang, because even though Johnny gave a different name to his dojo, he's still basically doing Cobra Kai. Wrong! So in this series, we're told that Miyagi-Do is exclusively concerned with self-defense, emphasis on the defense. They're going to wait for the opponent to throw the first strike and then block, or preferably evade the attack altogether. They're never going to throw the first strike. In the real world version of Miyagi-Do, Goju-Ryu, that's not necessarily the case. Goju-Ryu has two major forms of sparring: tournament style sparring and full contact sparring. The tournament style is kind of more what we see in Cobra Kai, meaning it's done to get points and it's done to win a match. The full contact sparring looks a little bit more like what we see Mr. Miyagi and Daniel doing when they're not fighting in a tournament setting. It's a little bit more close up, the kicks are kept low, and the blocks are more about redirecting your opponent rather than stopping and counterattacking. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule, but there are generally three ways you can avoid an oncoming attack. You can first avoid it, meaning you get entirely out of the way of it. You can stop it using a hard karate style block, or you can redirect it and move someone out of the way. Goju-Ryu has more circular style blocks than what we see in Cobra Kai and by extension Tang, where the goal is not to stop your opponent in his tracks, but rather to redirect him out of the way to open up for a clean strike to the ribs or to the lower body. This is a difference in expression, not a difference in goal. Cobra Kai, on the other hand, is less about finding an opening and more about creating an opening. Their fights tend to start in a much longer range, and they tend to initiate with either a longer punch or a more flashy kick to the head. Now, while it would be awesome if they could finish the fight in that first strike, that doesn't seem to be the main goal with most of these Cobra Kai fights. Instead, what they're trying to do is see how their opponent is going to react. Are you going to run away from the sudden pressure? Are you going to open up your body so I can throw a kick to the ribs? Are you going to cower down so I can drop you? It doesn't matter what it is. The Cobra Kai fighter gauges how their opponent's going to react and then punishes them for their weakness.
No problem, Sensei. You punch me. I have asthma, so...
Not anymore. We do not allow weakness in this dojo. So you can leave your asthma and your peanut allergies and all that other made-up bullshit outside. Is that understood?
Yes, but those are real medical problems. Yes, Sensei, understood.
I wouldn't say this makes them more offensive. Instead, I would say it makes them take more initiative. It doesn't matter how good you are at counterfighting. If the opponent is allowed to dictate the pace of the fight, eventually they will overpower you. And that's Cobra Kai's whole philosophy. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir! Here's where things get interesting, because in the series, Daniel says this.
Go to the teeth. Hey, you're just swinging at each other. Don't you teach any defense?
And what he thinks he's talking about is how Cobra Kai is all about wailing on your opponent until someone falls down, which is a fair thing to think if you don't know how to watch a fight. But we're educated people, so let's talk about what we see here. What I see is two fighters simultaneously throwing and blocking strikes. They're not just wailing away at each other, eating strikes. They are stopping the opponent's strike while returning with their own. What Daniel thinks he's talking about is that he wants to see these kids avoid the strikes. He wants to see them evade the strikes. And that's an admirable thing to do if we're talking about self-defense. But this is sparring. The whole point of this exercise is to engage and see how you will react once the fight is brought to you, or once you take the fight to your opponent. So, to just be circling your opponent and not pressing the action at all isn't actually doing any service to the exercise, and therefore, you're not getting anything out of it. And this leads me to my main point. We meet a lot of masters in the Karate Kid franchise. In the beginning, there was Mr. Miyagi and Sensei Kreese. Later on, we got Sato and Chozen, and of course, Johnny Lawrence himself. The one person I would say isn't and never will be a martial arts master is Daniel Larusso. Now, this is not a knock on Daniel as a character, he just wasn't taught the entirety of Miyagi-Do. He was taught just enough to get some bullies to leave him alone, and he was taught just enough to help him not be such a hothead.
Are ya? Have a nice trip? Coach, look what he's doing. Look what he's doing to Bobby. Hey, nobody hits me. I'm gonna kill him, Bobby.
Johnny was taught Cobra Kai as a way to harness his aggression, whereas Daniel was taught Miyagi-Do as a way to repress his aggression. And that ultimately leads to this false dichotomy between Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai, because Daniel has such a limited view of martial arts that he thinks anything that doesn't fit in his view of Miyagi-Do, and therefore all martial arts, has to be wrong.
Miyagi-Do has a rich tradition going back hundreds of years. You started your dojo, what, 3 weeks ago in a park? I'm pretty sure you came up with the name from this poster.
But the fact of the matter is, if you look at Chozen and Sato fighting, while yes, they're still clearly doing Miyagi-Do, they're still clearly redirecting and countering their opponent, they're way more aggressive and way more offensive in the way they fight. Sato and Chozen's Miyagi-Do kind of looks a little bit like Cobra Kai, because again, you can't have a martial art that only waits for the opponent to come to you. Which is kind of why I've been rolling my eyes at the idea of the new Miyagi-Do that Daniel and Johnny created being a mix of the two styles. It's always been a mix of offense and defense. Daniel just didn't know that. That's kind of the problem with a lot of martial arts. People think that the way they do it is the only and the right way. It doesn't matter what the style is, it's always the practitioner. Which may actually have been the point of Cobra Kai all along. It's not the style, it's the person. So the point that I'm trying to make, guys, is that there are no hard and fast lines in the martial arts. There are some styles, yes, that tend to be more evasive and defensive, but they have a good mix of offense thrown in. There are also styles that are more focused on offense, but have their own form of defense as well. Think about Floyd Mayweather's defensive boxing style. It's still clearly boxing, but he prefers counterfighting. That all being said, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you feel like you learned something, and if you're looking for a channel that combines the practicality of combat sports with the reality of self-defense and the fun of traditional martial arts, then please be sure to subscribe, tap the notification bell, like, share, and leave a comment. This has been Rob in Combat Self-Defense. I want to thank you for all the hard work, thank you for the hard work yet to be done, and I'll see you next time.